Om Shanti. Although we call ourselves human beings, we often find ourselves becoming human doings. Very much engaged or even entangled in all the activities of the day, the thoughts, the words, the deeds, the actions and interactions, and the various scenes and situations, some planned, some unexpected. The activities take priority, the doingness, And so we find ourselves focusing on outcomes and quantities, and might even feel drained. Or a loss of meaning. The solution is simple. Restore the experience of human being. Remember the self. This act of focusing less outwards and more inwards and having a qualitative experience of the self. This can be considered going into solitude. I still can be moving through the day, surrounded by people engaged in activity, but now very connected to the self as a being. And the sign I am connected is always the same. A sense of peace, a sense of calm, a sense of lightness. Not taking anything too seriously. Everything around me is temporal. It will come and go. The one constant is the self. Connected and aware and experiencing my own true nature of peace as I move through the day is acting from a place of solitude, of being. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti, good evening. Welcome to Interview with the Raj Yogi. And it's been quite a while, quite a few weeks. Judy and I have just returned from the spiritual headquarters in Madhuban. So this is a beautiful topic, and I feel like Judy heard my thoughts because I had some questions regarding the topic of solitude. And the reason why this came up was perhaps hearing just some experiences of the beginning days in the study of Raja Yoga. And in light of that, Judy was also in a silence retreat in Om Shanti Retreat Center in Delhi. And I don't know if you heard of this comment, but one of our senior students had mentioned there should be more silence and action. Maybe you didn't hear that, but someone heard that. Sister Mohini had said that that's good. More sitting is good, but there should be more silence and action, which resonated with me in terms of the meditation commentary about what solitude is. However, I think I've heard you also share in the beginning days their seated meditation was very simple at that time when they had their 14 years of just really concentrated silence. And they would be sitting a lot, and then others would just be, preparing food and passing them along meals. I don't know if you remember sharing that. So it's not mixed messages, maybe it's contextual, but I think I remember hearing you say that, there was a lot of seated silence time at that time. And then I'm hearing from some of the seniors it needs to be more integrated is those I don't think are conflicting um, messages, but I wasn't sure if you had any thoughts about that.
Om Shanti. Yes, I've heard all of those ideas. I suppose ultimately everyone will do what they're going to do. And the bottom line is that it's very good to develop a pleasant and pleasurable relationship with silence. Um, this idea of Om Shanti. Shanti means peace, but it also means silence. So I am a soul, I am silence. So obviously, I want to have that state while I'm walking and moving around so that it tells me I am very much connected to myself. But I wonder if the seated piece is that we're so rusty at it that we need to remove everything else, all of the distractions, just to connect. Um, when it comes to the example in fitness, yes, everyone should be wandering around with a really healthy core and walking properly and everything, but they're not. And sometimes it's not possible to establish that whilst engaged in all the activity. So we go into an artificial, it is artificial environment, some, like the gym or a studio or a physiotherapist, and they give us some very artificial exercises. It's not, we don't walk around in a plank, but through that, I might be able to feel the core. So there might be a place for both that the foundation is gone. So I have to create the foundation for my life, which is a spiritual sense of self. And the end game is absolutely to walk and move around in that state. There's no doubt about it. So everyone's on a different place, perhaps on that continuum. So everyone will have to sort out for themselves what makes sense given where they are in that development.
Okay, so one is more in preparation for the other. Now, I guess I was thinking about if then one needs to assess the quality of what they're experiencing in that seated silence and to be able to assess if that helps them to know I will have a better chance when I am walking and moving around.
What has been shared from the early days of the Brahma Kumaris is that they kind of did both simultaneously. They had seated, but they also had karma yoga because they had to actually. Um, there weren't many facilities, there weren't even structures. So they had to do a lot of things, everyone. So they couldn't all sit around. And it sounds like they even took shifts, if you will. So they developed a good sense of spirituality, of being connected to the self as a spiritual being, and then they practice this as they perform necessary activity. So I think, how do I know if I am maintaining that, what I experience in what we call conventional solitude, traditional solitude, seated in a room? How do I know I'm maintaining that state? as I walk and move around, all the different qualities of the soul will be present as I interact. So much less reactive, much more, if you will, detached and loving. So these are signs, even if something unexpected happens, this is really good feedback if I am maintaining that solitude as I come into interaction.
But how about the actual experience in seated solitude, if one is able to assess at that time?
I have a very nice story, and I heard it tonight as well, that soul consciousness is a state of concentration. So some of the things that happen when we're seated, top of the list is falling asleep. That is a clear sign I am not doing it. Now, many will protest, I didn't fall asleep. I was really peaceful. So this suggests maybe we're just not aware of what we're doing. um, so because like this, I could be wrong, but that is one of the signs of potential at the belly button. Absolutely contemplating the universe. So that's another possibility. So obviously, but even just the wandering mind. Um, so it's a very concentrated state, a very natural state, not a tense state, but I'm in point form. So am I stable? Am I able to stabilize there? Now, they share a interesting story from the beginning days. And they had obviously the number one and the number two student, Brahma, and the one known as Mama, at the front of the room conducting the meditation. So I always feel these two had very good clarity of vision. And I don't mean in an occult way at all. They could just see what's clearly there, which we seem to have become blind to. So I think they could assess where souls were at, but they also would sometimes have another sister sitting who would go into a very deep, subtle state and could actually feel when souls' intellects were wandering. And the group was humble enough that they didn't mind being told, oh, your intellect. So there's a lot of pieces there that we may not be able to replicate, especially the humility. Um, but wow, wouldn't that have been helpful to get immediate, concrete feedback? You're on, you're not on. So we're going to have to develop a few skills to keep an eye on the self, honesty, humility, concentration, simplicity, detachment. If I have these skill sets, the odds are I'll be able to move into that state. Top of the list is I actually have the faith I am a soul.
It's interesting you mentioned just that last remark. In the sense, it's like the overarching aspect that really it's ultimately about my awareness. And sometimes maybe we get quite technical about things and sort of lose the point. So I was thinking, I don't want us to sort of deviate over to physical fitness, but just in terms of the parallel, um, because sometimes, we are seated in solitude, have certain practices, and you're saying, top of the list is my falling asleep or not, or is my mind wandering? Um, what am I engaged in? You were talking about concentration of soul consciousness. On the parallel of physical fitness, sometimes some of those exercises are so artificial. I mean, I've had those situations with my physiotherapist. I don't even know how I can translate that over. Or is it just like, you know, Karate Kid where you're just told to practice drills and hoping something is going to flood over to something more practical?
I think the first thing that's interesting in both cases is, and this is why we say the faith you are a soul, whether or not I experience it, I am a soul. And whether or not it's activating properly, I do have a physical core. So in both cases, it's there. It's not that I'm trying to create it, and maybe I will or maybe I won't. So I'm trying to touch something that is there or activate something that is there. And I think going in there with that understanding says, yes, I have the capacity. It gives a certain attitude that's really important. But when we're doing the physical example, for example, a plank, there's a whole checklist of cues that we go through. And yes, every instructor cues differently. Some is more helpful, some less so. But there's a whole, so that it's very clear what we're trying to do. And as I do it repeatedly, I'm able to get closer and closer in accuracy on that checklist. So the same thing for soul consciousness. There is a checklist we're given. You're not in your belly button, you're in the center of the forehead, and you're not this body, and it's wrapped around. Yeah, there's a checklist of things. And I may not be feeling them, but as I do it repeatedly and again, honestly and patiently, and I think I would add fearlessly, because it's a lot of letting go, uh, but repeatedly committed and engaged and interested, then eventually I start to get more and more accurate in that check and activate what is already there. I am a soul.
How subtle do you feel awareness is then? It seems like perhaps maybe oftentimes we're doing a lot of mental acrobatics, and it's not necessarily actually has anything to do with awareness. And maybe I can confess on your behalf times you've had to play Minnie Mouse. I don't know if you've ever had to wear an actual, huge costume like I've seen some do, but it seems like such a silly example. But, I'm thinking about some of those who've had to play that role of Donald Duck, Winnie the Pooh. They're not questioning themselves when they have this big physical costume around them about who they really are. But I wonder if we take for granted the subtlety of how powerful awareness is then.
First off, we always have awareness. Um, when we start, our awareness, we have what's called body conscious awareness. So we think we're the body. We do have an awareness or a mother, whatever the case. So it's very powerful, and we know it's powerful. Um, what we're trying to do is have awareness of subtle things, actually. So awareness is just at a very gross level, and it's had the habit of being at that level, and it's confirmed, if you will, or validated by gross things. So I might have the awareness I am female, and there's some very overt validation, that to have awareness of subtle things like I am a soul, it's really because it's not that it's difficult, it's actually a very simple thing, but because of the habit of a gross awareness, it becomes a challenge to us. So we've always had awareness. We know the power of awareness. I was, you know, just reminded of this weekend. Those who have the awareness that they are a dancer, it is always so sobering to be reminded of what they do under the weight of that awareness. Um, yeah. So yes, awareness is powerful. But can I have an awareness of something subtle? Is the question. Can I hold a subtle awareness of myself? Because soul consciousness is a subtle awareness.
So, is that why then this link between solitude and soul consciousness is so important because of how subtle it is? And we're invited, I believe it was yesterday and today, for the students, that it's only in solitude that I can really emerge the significance of, well, that's called churn the ocean of knowledge, but emerge the significance of just what it means to be a soul. What is the impact of practicing? I mean, the list goes on and on, but just the importance of solitude.
Yeah, there was a couple of interesting points. One was solitude understood as introversion. So that I can do anywhere. look inwards, but also is describing solitude as a particular environment or atmosphere that is supportive of what I'm trying to do. That in a very supportive atmosphere, I can move forward much more quickly, which isn't to say that it can't happen in every atmosphere, but I need to be mindful of the effect of the atmosphere on what I'm trying to do. And I think this is why that conventional concept of solitude arose, where I need to go off into the jungle, I need to go into a cave, I need to get away from this other atmosphere or dynamics in order to shift what's going on inside. So there's that feeling, and that's become the understanding of solitude. But here, the feeling that no, wherever I am, I can turn inwards. I am not naive to the effect of the atmosphere. I am taking that into account, but I can do this anywhere. So I'm going to have to be really focused.
So perhaps maybe one final question in terms of your experience. And in the spiritual headquarters, there are three campuses, and the one you were staying at, Pandavavan, is the original campus. What was your experience being? Because the vibrations in that space are, I would say I could even feel a huge difference from that space and Gyan Sarovar, which is the second campus. So what was your experience of the solitude and how it was supporting you in terms of practicing soul consciousness?
Even in a fitness studio, or for some, let's say you go into a church versus, forgive the example, but say a gym, you can feel that different activities have been happening in those two different spaces and they've created an atmosphere. So definitely the original campus, Pandavavan, where the original students practiced, has a very strong vibration, in which you feel you're making no effort, you are meditated on. But all three campuses I noticed have a speciality. And the first we started when we arrived, what we call downstairs in the most active. It wasn't as active as it can be, but it was starting to get pretty active. And so I was really looking at myself, and this is where the original students in their final days were down there. And, I'm sure they would have loved to be in Oven, but due to physical challenges, they took up residence in the most busy campus and the youngest campus with the most variety and different kinds of energy. And when you sit in their memorial spaces, um, it fascinates me because in those memorial spaces for those original students, it feels like the same vibration as the original campus. So ultimately, it's coming from the soul and the feelings towards that soul. So I always feel the call of the current time is to create that kind of energy that we experience in the original campus inside myself. And I have to carry it with me and create it wherever I go.
Sorry, I'm sneaking in one last question in relation. No, you did in relation. Well, I'll have to ask you offline about that. That I do find that very powerful. That they're not actually there, but what I wanted to ask was last year when I was there at the base campus, actually, and nearly everyone had already moved up, and they're just slowly trying to get us all up systematically. And the body was actually extremely ill. I think you had left and turned out it was a flu. But it was one of the most powerful experiences in just one of those. It was actually in one of the rooms beside the auditorium. And are you able to share perhaps why that was the case? Is that my own efforts?
I know it was the case for me, and I've heard from other Brahmins, especially when they first come into the study, um, you know, they don't have a really proper meditation room or facilities. It might be their closet. And they say those were some of the most powerful meditations I ever had. And so, what's going on, right? And I often feel the degree of detachment that I'm able to achieve, like really deep detachment. Illness of the body can do it. Freedom from our usual schedule can do it. We often use distraction, but what we're using to distract ourselves is just getting us entangled in something else. So it's not quite successful. But there's a perfect, if you will, mix of factors that actually can create a powerful experience. And it doesn't necessarily have to be the place. And so if we can, we kind of discover what those factors are, a momentary reprieve from body consciousness, the enthusiasm of newness, the fearlessness and excitement of letting go. I mean, there's a bunch of factors that really all add up to a powerful experience. So I think the secret of the original jewels, why Pandava Bhavan is so powerful, is they were able to sustain that recipe so over a long period of time. So it built up a stock. But I could really have it anywhere, but it's not sustained. So I'm not really creating that kind of atmosphere. I need to discover how to protect those those first days, if you will.
Thank you. Sustaining that recipe. And perhaps we will have a little reflection.
Solitude traditionally was connected to going off into the forest and isolating oneself in a cave, a place where there's not much sensory input, physically alone, very simple, quiet, undistracted. I can create that same experience right now while surrounded by everything. And while the eyes and ears, all the sensory organs are open, functioning, receiving. The place where I, the soul, sits, it is in some ways like a cave behind the forehead, the space of my inner world. And within that, a very special part of my inner world, the very center, which is most pure, most sacred, untouched by time. In that place at the center of my inner world, that cave of purity, I can experience my true self. I, the soul, a spiritual being, separate from the body. Nothing of the temporal realm belongs to me, not even the body with all of its senses. I am free. And what does belong to me is a very deep sense of peace, which is what I've been seeking all along. This cave of solitude within the self. Om Shanti. Om Shanti. Thank you, Judy. Some thought-provoking aspects actually to practice, not just to think about. But so we wanted to remind souls that there is a learn about meditation workshop taking place at the Academy this Saturday.
So that is March 23rd. And refresh my memory, Judy, about the timing.
It's 12:15 to 1:30. 12:15 to 1:30.
So are welcome just to drop by. The registration is appreciated, but not necessary. You can find that on the website as well as Eventbrite. We just have our usual drop-in sessions on site and online at the Inner Peace Center, as well as here, as well as English at the Academy at this point in time, and online as well through YouTube. But if you have other questions, feel free to email the center, but the website, all of the sessions on there. However, we will be refreshing in terms of the next phase of courses for the next quarter, hopefully in the next couple of weeks as well. So thank you for joining with us. Om Shanti.